Hi there Booktube, it's Eleanor here and it's time for SFF Babbles again. This is a series of discussion videos and recommendation videos that we set up as part of the Booktube SFF Awards. Everyone who wants to make videos can take part in this. There is a picture, I believe, on Twitter and maybe on Instagram as well of a list of the Babble topics, and it's also on our Tumblr page, so check all that out down below. But today's topic is our favourite SFF, and when I started looking into this, it started making me think about the type of SFF that I like. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that first, because as it turns out, I kind of had an inkling that this was the case. You sort of get to know your taste in reading, but my taste in SFF seems to be quite specific. So when it comes to fantasy, if it's YA fantasy, I tend to enjoy a lot more than adult fantasy. But the adult fantasy that I do like, I seem to like it if it's set in a sort of historical medieval setting. Much more, I don't really enjoy urban fantasy, and I don't seem to enjoy fantasy so much that is set in a more modern or, 1900s onward setting. So that is with the one exception of Gail Carriger's books. However, for me, I generally, looking back at the books that I've given 5 stars, they seem to be set more in medieval settings or settings that are completely different to our own. So let me show you a few examples of that. So 2 books that I gave 5 stars. First is the first book in a series, and so far I think I've given most of the books 5 or 4 stars in this series, and that is The Painted Man by Peter V. Brett. Now this is an adult fantasy and it's set in very much a medieval type setting, and people are still living in townships. Their houses are made of like wood and they're still growing their own vegetables, and it's market towns, and it's very much that sort of more medieval feel, and that definitely seems to be a something that really draws me in. This particular series is brilliant, and I urge you, if you're a bit nervous about getting into adult fantasy, which is something that sometimes I find a little bit daunting because there can be lots and lots of characters, there can be lots of different things you have to take on board, and there's all the world building, and this one does it really well. It's the story, and you do have a number of different characters that you're following this, but you slowly start to build up these characters. You're slowly getting to know them all through this one first main character, and his name is Arlen, and it's through him at the beginning that we discover that there's demons in this world, and as the sun sets, these demons rise from the ground and they attack people. Over the years, people have discovered these magical wards they can paint on their houses, paint on their buildings, which keep the different demons at bay. However, sometimes with wear and tear, there's a gap or bits of it get dissolved of the marks that they put on their houses, and demons get in and attack and kill and take these people away. And it's the story of Arlen and how he starts to discover ways to fight back, and it progresses from there and becomes a much bigger story. But it is really great because it builds it up slowly. You're not thrown in too quickly, and I just can't recommend this highly enough. I love this series. And then another more recent series that I've really been enjoying, I've just received the second book from the author to read, so I'm really excited about that, and that is The Dragon's Blade by Michael R. Miller, and this is the Reborn King. I absolutely love the covers of these books, and they're in that sort of buttery soft cover, or something about these, I just really enjoy them. And this again is set in that more sort of medieval setting, and as you can see on the front, there is a little bit to do with dragons in it. However, the dragons are a different type of being. They have evolved over years and become more human-like. And one of the dragons, the prince, I believe, the prince of dragons, is mortally wounded in a battle, and so is rebirthed through a spell, and he is born as a human baby again, and it's following his life growing up and what is happening in this kingdom on all the different sort of political sides. And again, it's one of those stories that really builds it up slowly. It's again set in a more medieval settings with castles castles and townships, and it's just brilliant, and I really enjoyed this as well. So as an interim book series, there's always a lot of debate about this, about whether this particular trilogy is YA or adult. And I think it depends on where you live and what country you live in. I haven't got the first one here to show you, but I've got the second two. And that is Pierce Brown's series, which starts with Red Rising, and then you have Golden Sun, and then you have Morning Star. And I really enjoyed this as well. I'd say that this felt a little bit like a cross between science fiction and fantasy, because it's set on sort of this other planet, which makes you start thinking that it's science fiction, that's been colonised, and you have the Reds who have been sort of sent there and told that they're there to sort of mine and check everything underground is suitable, and they're testing the air and making sure that everything is okay for colonisation. Little do they know that colonisation has been happening and people have been living there for years, and they've been duped into keeping underground and doing all the menial tasks. And then you have different layers of different colours, with the golds at the very top who are very godlike and possess these godlike powers, and that's where the sort of magical element comes in. So I'm not really sure where these are classified, whether they're fantasy or science fiction or a cross. But I really enjoyed these. They're very fast paced, which is more reminiscent of a YA fantasy, but they also have some really complex themes, some really interesting politics, and some really interesting human relationships. So I just love these, and I gobbled them up, and they are definitely page turners, and a really great gateway into sort of a cross between adult and YA, I suppose. And then I couldn't have this video without talking about a book that I have loved recently. I love her other series that I have read, but Laini Taylor's new book, Strange the Dreamer, this is an ARC I was very kindly sent by the publisher, was amazing. It was brilliant. I love her writing. It's just beautiful writing. I love the imagery she conjures up, and I really love how her imagination works. In this one we have Laszlo Strange, who is nicknamed Strange the Dreamer because he likes to dream about this town called Weep. It wasn't called Weep, but no one can remember its original name, but years have passed since it has been known as Weep. It's kind of disappeared. People don't get to visit there very often, and Laszlo has been brought up in a monastery, and then latterly has been working as a librarian, and we're just finding out about this world that they live in and the types of things that are happening, alchemy, and looking into this town of Weep, and then things unfold, and magic and gods and all sorts of things ensue, and it was absolutely brilliant. One thing I would say about this one as a bit of a trigger warning, if you are triggered by rape, there is quite heavy talk of rape in this, so possibly not for you if that is something that is triggering for you, but I absolutely adored this, and it's definitely a fancy I'd recommend. It's out on the 28th of March, so not long if it is something that you fancy trying. And if you liked Laini Taylor's Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy, I really think if you like her writing you will really love this. And then to talk a little bit about science fiction, it's fairly obvious to me, looking at the books that I give 5 stars, that I have a taste. I like YA science fiction, and I really like space operas in the adult genre. I think I find adult science fiction intimidating, and I worry that I'm not going to understand the concepts because I haven't got that sort of technological brain. So the books that I've really enjoyed recently are Illuminate and Gemina by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. You've probably no doubt heard of these by now. Everyone has read them, and if you haven't, you definitely should. They are books that are written in a different type of format. They're told through blog entries and video diaries and emails, and they're the story of, well, the first book is the story of 2 main characters, and when something happens on the planet they live on, they are forced to evacuate on these ships, and it's about that. And then the second book runs in a parallel timeline to that, so we do get a little bit of talk about people and things in this one, but it's mainly a sort of separate story running along the same timeline that sort of bashes together at the end and follows two different characters, and was equally as good, and I can't wait for the next one. And then I've talked about this not so much recently but a lot in the past, and that is Fortune's Pawn by Rachel Bach. This is the first book in a trilogy which has Fortune's Pawn, Honour's Night and Heaven's Kingdom. It's called the Paradox Trilogy. This is very much a sort of romping science fiction space opera story. It's about our main character Devi. She's a mercenary. She really wants to make it up the ladder, up the chain of command, and in order to do that she can skip a few stages and fast forward and fast track that if she works as sort of a hired goon, a bodyguard, on this particular ship where people don't tend to last very long. So she joins this ship and she finds out about the different people on it, and adventure and space adventure ensues, and I just really enjoyed it. It was just lots of fun and very light reading. A book that I have loved and waxed lyrical about, and I'm sure everyone else who's read it has, is A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. Again, this had a space opera style feel to it. I definitely seem to enjoy those stories where you get a group of misfits or a group of different people on a ship and they discover their personality, they have a bit of a mission, but mainly it's focused around them and their relationships, and that seems to be the type of story I enjoy, and that's exactly what this one is. It's the story about a number of different alien species. They're working together on a ship, and we have a new person that joins them, and how it changes the dynamic and how we see things through her eyes and how we get to know the characters. And it was really good, and yeah, very diverse, this one as well. There's some really great and interesting both characters, both gender wise and ethnicity, if you're going to go for that for alien species. But yeah, I thought it was brilliant. And then finally, an author that I have really enjoyed and I do own more of, so I want to get back to, and that is John Scalzi. And this one particular I really enjoyed, and it's called Lockham. Now this is unusual for me because it is a more contemporary setting, although it is set in the future. This is set in the future when a virus has spread, and this virus has spread sort of like an acute meningitis. A number of people are affected by it, and 1% of them end up being locked in, which means their brain is functioning fine but their body is just completely paralysed. And so because of advanced technology, they've created these threeps where you can put your mind into these robots, and so you can go about and actually do things. So although you're lying in a bed in your bedroom, your threep and your consciousness and your brain are going around town, going to work and doing various things. And it is this is like a cop story about a guy who's his first day on the beat, and he is a threep, and it's about the politics of that and how that affects people. You know, is it okay for that to happen? Because, you know, can these people just do whatever they want because their bodies aren't going to be harmed, and it doesn't matter if a robot gets bashed up, so can they therefore just do whatever they want? And does it cause them to be reckless? And, you know, there's lots of politics and different ideas in here, and I really enjoyed how this one made me think, so this was one that I definitely recommend too. So that's just a little look into some of the books I like. I tend to be very mainstream, I think, in terms of my SFF. I think that's how I would class it. I seem to be very mainstream, very sort of popularist. I tend to enjoy the books that everybody enjoys. I don't tend to have my little niche, or I don't tend to like the unusual ones. I struggle with them. I like the ones that end up being popular, and I'm quite happy with that. And yeah, I've really enjoyed getting a bit more into it recently, and especially the SFF Awards I love being a judge of, because it forces me to read quite a lot of books that maybe I might not have picked up, and I have found some really good ones through it. So yeah, that is my pick. What are your favourite SFF reads? Can you recommend any to me? Any that you think that I should branch out and try? And let me know in the comments down below, or even better if you want to make a video. Okay, well, I will chat to you soon. Bye for now, Booktube.